Since the crushing defeat suffered by Vice President Kamala Harris, millions of ex-users have fled Elon Musk's platform for one started by Twitter's Jack Dorsey. It's called Bluesky. And in fact, 20 million users have migrated there, including me if you want to find me there. But if part of the reason for Dems losing was being out of touch with a large swathe of America, does this division of platforms further enforce silos and a distance between two ways of thinking? Here to discuss this and what the left and Democrats could learn from the right is Tara McGowan, founder and publisher of Courier. Tara, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So what do we think about this migration? Bluesky has suddenly picked up a lot of traction, millions and millions of users flocking to it. Do we think that's a good thing or a bad thing? What's your overall take?
I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, Elon Musk has turned Twitter, now X, into really his propaganda machine. Even if you don't follow him on the platform, he is going to be every few tweets that you see in your feed. Regardless of that, he really has taken it over. It has become a really rich space for his followers and for right-wing folks and bots. And so it's not the place that it used to be, certainly. So I don't think it's surprising, especially given the incredible proximity and intimate relationship Elon Musk has now with President-elect Trump, that we're seeing a lot of Democrats flee. I think that it's interesting because I think the reactive nature of sort of leaving is in part emotional and in part what I was just saying about what Twitter has become under Elon Musk's rule and thumb and where it's going. But also, it does raise this question of the decentralization and siloing of different communities where they're only then talking to each other / themselves, and they're not being shown different information or opinions that don't reflect theirs. I don't think that's bad if that's the intention. If you want to be in a more insular community, there is advantage to that. But if you want to be on a platform where there is discourse, debate, or different viewpoints and ideas, those are becoming harder and harder to find, given how these platforms are owned by folks that are using them for their own personal, business, financial, and now political interests.
Well, sure. I mean, the platforms, right, they're private. They're owned by private companies. They were always, in some sense, right, being used for the financial benefit of the people who own them, mostly by selling, creating content that generates advertising revenue, that recommends to you things you want to engage with and things you want to see to keep you on the platform so that you might buy the things that are being advertised. And that's generally how the business model works, unless it's a subscription model. Elon has tried to introduce subscription elements to the platform. I agree that it was nice to previously have kind of everyone of different political stripes interacting on the same platform, but just like there has been fragmentation in other aspects of the media, I think it does make sense to me in the long term for social media to have a similar revolution where people, especially if it's organized by politics, for people who are politically interested from this direction will be here, politically interested from some other direction over here, etc. I think my skepticism of Bluesky is that it's just not. When people dramatically quit Twitter and we're going to start another one, that seems to always fizzle out eventually. But maybe it won't be true this time. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that a lot of the folks that left this time around are going to go back to X or Twitter because, yes, I agree with your point about business interests and models of these platforms, but that's not what I was talking about with Elon Musk and what he's done to Twitter. He has really made it his playground and his platform for everything that he wants to express, whether it's his different companies' business interests or his political statements, to the point where, his hypocrisy is really, really explicit right now because he talks a really big game about free speech, but he has censored accounts and folks that disagree with him on the platform. I think we're going to see that pick up. I think this was his intention. I mean, actually, I would argue that Twitter used to be many, years ago, actually far more progressive and liberal, to be honest, or populated, by a lot of media and journalists and academics and things of that nature. And so, he bought it. He can do whatever he wants with it. That's what he's done. But he has made changes that has made it much more of a Musk feed than an actual place for information, content, or discourse.
On a separate point, but somewhat related to that, Tara, since the election, we've seen a fair amount of discussion about the fact that there has been a growth or an upsurge over several years of right-leaning platforms. So after then President Trump was thrown off what was then Twitter and Facebook in the wake of the January the 6th insurrection, there was then this growth in alternative platforms. Of course, he has Truth Social. There are various, there's Gab, there's Parler, there are others like that. And I have heard the argument made from people of a left-leaning disposition that liberals or the left are kind of behind in creating a social media ecosystem that is more friendly to them. What do you think of that argument?
Those folks are right. That's absolutely true. The left has always been behind the right in terms of their willingness to invest in building their own media, right? That actually started with talk radio and Fox News before they migrated much more quickly and strategically to social media platforms to spread disinformation and divisive content, hateful rhetoric, et cetera. And so it's not surprising to me that they are also ahead of the curve on Democrats when it comes to social influencers and podcasters. Pew just put out a great report earlier this week that showed that kind of it looked at social influencers of different political persuasions, and the vast majority of them on most platforms are men and are right-wing or right-leaning. And so the left has a lot of work to do here. And as someone who has built the largest progressive news network in the country, Courier, I started it very intentionally because I felt that Democrats and just pro-democracy folks, honestly, who don't support fascism or the MAGA agenda, if there's any daylight between the two, needed to actually build their own media infrastructure to re-earn the trust of millions of Americans who are not tuning in to traditional media. They're not paying through paywalls. And the only way in which then Democrats or progressives were communicating their message was through billions of dollars of paid advertising. I started Courier almost 6 years ago. I'm very proud that we now have over 5 million subscribers across our 11 states that we're in, and we reach over 80 million Americans a day across social. But also, we get pennies to the dollar of these paid advertising programs that are really continuing to be where all of the resources on the left go. And that comes down to a very entrenched consultant culture that I have spoken out about over the years that really has a chokehold on Democrats' ability to diversify how they think about communications and messaging. And so they have fallen behind, and they haven't really had the courage to actually invest in building their own channels. I think it started out more as partisan media is bad, so we don't need to do that. And now I don't think anybody can argue that they can lean on legacy media or should, right? Donald Trump didn't do one traditional media interview in the course of his campaign. He even trolled Democrats about that, and he won the election. And so I think that we are in a moment of reckoning. I think it's overdue, really overdue, but I do think that Democrats need to and will get serious about investing. There's no question they're behind.
I think conservatives would say, with the Twitter situation in particular, they would say, well, in the golden era you're describing, it was actually had the thumbs on the scale, not in a leftist direction, but in a center left, culturally progressive kind of direction, due to the moderation, which was done in coordination with the federal government. And then Elon came in, decided not to play that game anymore, and they've actually turned it into a free speech platform. And now, if liberals are leaving the platform because they don't like that, they don't like interacting with conservatives are not being silenced and suppressed anymore, thus is the tilt toward it being right. It's not because Elon is deliberately pumping out his content or right-leaning content. It's that right-leaning people were the only people still around who wanted a kind of free speech thing, and so they're now seeing more of the content they want, because the other side has left not liking debate, not liking free speech.
I mean, you can't really argue that seriously. Anybody could log on to X right now and scroll through and see that he absolutely is pumping his content into the feeds and dominating it. That's just accurate. But it doesn't really matter. I am not actually opposed to people self-selecting where they go to and get their information. I think it's in the internet and social media has made the information ecosystem incredibly democratic and diverse, and people are going to self-select. The issues are that the platforms, most of these distribution channels, are not regulated actually. So they are all creating their own rules. They're rolling back those rules. They get called out for censoring the right. They get called out for censoring the left. They're really just doing whatever is in their best business interests. And so, I mean, I think that there is a larger conversation that needs to be had in this country about how and where truth and facts and science have a space, because we know that right-wing media and right-wing influencers and podcasters are driving an enormous amount of lies, misinformation, and disinformation to be able to advance their ideological, political, and in some ways religious agenda on our country.
Tara McGowan, founder and publisher of Courier, we really appreciate you joining us. Great discussion, and I'm sure we'll return to this topic.
Thank you.